What's up, everybody? Hope you're doing well, staying happy, staying healthy. Today is a special podcast, so I put together a lot of my favorite moments from the podcast. So this is episode 26 through 35. And I basically took a bunch of snippets of my favorite parts of conversations from all these amazing people that I am grateful for, and I sliced them up into little segments for this entire podcast. So sit back, enjoy. Thanks for supporting the podcast. If you guys would do me a favor, just leave a little like, subscribe, whatever, wherever you're listening, or if you're on Spotify, they have reviews now, so a big 5-star there would be nice. Thanks again for the support. If you want to be the first to get new episodes, then I will send you emails through Live Producers Online's newsletter. So if you want to join, just go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter. Otherwise, yeah, enjoy this episode. And a huge thanks to all the awesome guests that have joined for this episode. This first episode segment is number 26 with Erin Barra. You talked about teaching with songwriting and teaching at Berklee. Kind of want to dive in, kind of pick your brain on that process of songwriting and producing, what that looks like for you and some of the things that you teach. What are some of the biggest struggles that you've seen that comes along with songwriting?
I think that probably on both sides, it's about internal narrative. So in some ways, people are just like inherently good at writing or they aren't. Like you can, like what they were given. And some people are really hard, and then others don't. And that's where I think the struggle is where people don't tell themselves no enough. It's like a lot of times writers, especially if you're a younger writer, you get kind of caught up in the moment and that feeling of being inspired and go with like the first thing that comes out of your mouth or to mind. And usually that's not the best thing you could come up with. And so, you know, people need to practice. I can do better. I can do better than that. No. So I just see a lot of like really talented people not reaching their full potential because they're not willing to say, no, I can do better, or work harder, or rewrite, or like really, really dig in and try things a number of ways and like see what actually is working. Because so like in some ways that's laziness, I think, but it's also just like a mental thing, you know, where you're like, oh, that's so great. That's it. And then, you know, somebody suggests you change it. No changing it. Yeah. It's just the difference between who are you making music for? Is it for other people to listen to and enjoy and digest and understand? Or is it just for you? Like if it's just for you, then whatever. But if you want to be better at writing, you have to say no. You have to start saying no to yourself. I constantly have to be outputting. And sometimes I just don't feel like it. And I have to just respect those moments and say, you know, now's not the time to be doing this. Now it's not the time to be working on this, and just setting it aside for later. So sometimes just stopping trying. For me, I think that's the right answer because I don't have the option of not doing it. So it's like just not right now, you know, it has to be my answer, and just like allowing that and just respecting that sometimes my brain needs space and my like creative well might need to be filled, if you will, and not feeling bad about that. I think that's what really freaks people out. They're like, oh, I can't figure it out. Like it's gone. I'll never write again. Or I've forgotten how to do it. And I used to really beat myself up a lot if I was struggling. But, you know, it's like, cause you know, my feeling is that we're just really like catalysts for communication in a way. And so usually if I'm not feeling it, it's because like I'm tired or I'm stressed out. And like the only way to really get back to basics is by just
taking a nap,
taking time, like sometimes it's a couple days and coming back to it. And it's, you know.
This next episode is episode number 28 with Jason Timothy.
I always found also that there's a little bit of angst that you put into your music when you're not able to properly 100% express yourself through your instrument. It's almost like it forces you to get in front of your music instead of hiding behind your talent. Now, if you have talent, that's wonderful. I'm not saying that talent is a bad thing, but what I'm saying is understand that expression and passion are usually going to take you further after you understand some of the basics, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And two, I think the best bands, not the best musicians, the best bands, in my opinion, are bands that have good taste in music. In other words, I would prefer to work with someone who consistently makes me incredible mixtapes of artists all the time, because I know that they've got their finger on the pulse with the ear. There's so many musicians that listen to other musicians that are like them because they want that feedback that tells them that them being great on their instrument is important, I suppose. So they're going to find other bands that are also great on their instruments. Or, for example, I think if I would have started at 18 years old with some guy giving me lessons and he was more of a blues guitar player, then I would probably become more blues related. But since I didn't know anything about anything, all I did was try to mimic and simplify the songs that I liked. And some of them, I simplified their complexity, and some of them were simple to begin with. And I realized, wow, some of these melodies that I like most are not the most complex things. And, and then when I went out and started playing music, I didn't start off very good and my band wasn't great, but I did get feedback that was very positive, and it made me realize, wow, people appreciate music that isn't very complex. I'm going to try to build off of this, and I'll better myself only when I hear something in my head that I can't play right now. So it's like I only reached to get further with my musicianship when I had an idea that forced me to extend myself. That way I was always being authentic to what I was inspired by.
That's really good.
Which is the same way that I approached Ableton, and producing. I only moved forward when I found, I wish I could do this thing. There's got to be a way to do this thing. And that's when that's when I hunted it down. And then when I got that solution, that usually drove me for a while without needing to look behind my shoulder again. And I just kind of kept driving forward in my path. And then I spent more of my time listening to other artists instead of trying to understand how they did what they did. Just be inspired by whatever they're doing sonically. And then you go back and go, well, how would I approach that?
Next up is Graham Plant from episode 29. He's also the head of sales and partnerships at SUBPAC.
What we find is a lot of producers experience acoustical issues in their rooms. So even in the most well-treated rooms, there's still a lot of acoustical issues going on. And I guess what I mean by acoustical issues is something called antinodes and nodes. And that's essentially frequencies are not distributed evenly around your mixing environment. And these are traditional or more traditionally known as standing waves in our community. So like what sound is just the air vibrating in your room.
Right.
But when you get down into those low frequencies, the bass frequencies, these are the issues that producers generally have the most problems with. It's because those frequencies take so much space to develop. For example, a 20 hertz wave. So 20 hertz is like right down in your subs. That wave takes 56.6 feet to develop. So if you're not working in a room that has the correct dimensions to support that frequency, it's not going to be able to spread itself out evenly around the room. It's very easy to test this. For everyone listening right now, you can even pause the podcast and go into Ableton and go into settings and run a test tone and go to 40 hertz and turn it up to an exciting level. This is considering if you're using studio monitors. And then so crank up 40 hertz and walk around your room. You're going to experience areas that are very, very, very bassy. And you're going to experience other areas of the room that might not sound like they have any bass at all. And this is all caused by how sound is interacting with the air in your room. And so with SUBPAC, you're removing the air from the equation and you're putting sound information directly against the person's body. Therefore, nothing's really lost in the translation from the sound to how you're interpreting it. You know, it's really about working in mixing environments that are not representing the sound well. And yeah, that's really from acoustical issues.
Yeah, I've had that same problem with myself. Like in my studio, I had a guy named Dennis Foley. He runs the company acousticfields.com. And he is like one of the most brilliant acousticians that I've ever heard of our day. And he actually built out like special cabinets, and they're called acoustic diaphragmatic absorbers for the low end in my studio. And because I live in a duplex, I only have so much room. I can't just start demolishing walls. I think a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, bedroom producers, have dealt with that struggle of like, my room is too small, my ceiling is too short. When I got the SUBPAC, to be really honest with you, like I was just blown away because I no longer had to deal with that sound pressure like you were talking about. And like my students, I explained to them, like, if you have your room, which would be like a cup, and then the sound is water, you can only pour so much water into that cup before it overflows. Your cup is only so big.
Yeah, that's a great example.
You can only push so much pressure into a room before it's like a balloon. It's going to pop and it just doesn't sound good.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned, you know, there's a lot of producers who are working at home these days. Mm-hmm. You know, they're working in their apartments. And another huge issue, and not too many people know about this, is something called SBI, and that's speaker boundary interference. And so you don't really want your speakers or your studio monitors to be, you know, close to any walls, because that's going to create almost a doubling of sound pressure in that area. So a lot of the time, what you want to do is you want to move your speakers away from the walls. But say you're working in your bedroom, right? You probably don't have that much space.
Right.
So, you know, again, SUBPAC is another solution, you know, that can really, really help you create that accurate mixing environment. And, you know, even though there's all these acoustical problems that are existing in the room, you're now bypassing them because you have that physical reference of audio directly against your body.
Yeah. This next episode is episode 30 with Cliff Goldmacher.
In the end, the thing that has sustained me almost from the beginning of my career up until now, 25 years later, is my network. Mm-hmm. And that network started out as the same people who moved to town with me when we were all brand new and didn't know anything about what we were doing. Now all the way up to people who are super established in their careers and who send me referrals. And it's all, I mean, with very few exceptions, it's the network. So and networking has sort of a negative connotation. And I don't want it to sound like what I'm saying is I'm staying up late and going to bars and telling people I think they're great and they should come and record with me. That's not what this is.
Spending hours on LinkedIn.
No, it's really not that. It's meeting like-minded people who you really get along with and getting to know each other as human beings get to know each other, not as someone who you think can do something for you at some point. That's a generally an unhealthy recipe. So meet people as people. And I'll give you a classic example. I worked as a staff songwriter in Nashville. I had a publishing deal. The way that I got that publishing deal is not by staying out in bars and meeting publishers. It was a week after I moved to Nashville, when I didn't know anything about anything. I went and joined the Nashville Songwriters Association. And the guy who was working the front desk, who had also just moved to Nashville, we just hit it off. So he's in an administrative assistant job. I've written 10 songs. 5 years later, he's running a publishing company. I've written hundreds of songs. He signed me to my deal. So we grew together. And that is a much more accurate depiction of how you get a publishing deal than you go to town, you're great, and some publisher you meet at a bar says, I've got to sign you. That's not reality.
It's true. Yeah.
All the more reason that if you're serious about your craft, you need to get to a place where there are people that you can meet in a natural, organic way who in time, and none of this happens quickly. It certainly doesn't happen as quickly as we'd like it.
Yeah.
So get to the place where you're going to meet these people and build those relationships naturally, and it will happen. And as I said, if you can't live there, if that doesn't work for your lifestyle, at the very least, go to these towns a couple of times a year, go to music conferences, make an effort to connect with people, like-minded people doing what it is you're doing.
So that was really good. And I love what you said at the end with the conferences. That's something I started doing more recently, is going to like the DIY musician conference that's happening in Austin pretty soon in like a month or two. You know, things like that, definitely where you're going to start to cultivate those communities and those small circles of people. And it is about relationships in the end, you know?
Always.
Yes. I mean, relationships don't usually start with you just walking up and shoving a business card in somebody's face. Like, but yeah, I mean, it's what do you bring to the relationship, not just what are you taking from it. So I love that. That's really good. This next episode is episode number 31 with Tim Linetsky, aka Underbelly. Yeah, and like one thing I love about you is you talk a lot about like the psychology behind producing music. One of the things I heard you say in that podcast with Afro DJ Mac is like laughing at yourself is like the best medicine, and being able to like have fun with the production process and not overthink all the tools and everything along the way.
Something liberating to just be like, yo, I suck at producing, and let's just have fun with it. There's a certain humbleness that comes with that, and allowing yourself to be a little less precious about everything and not get hung up on stuff. One thing that I notice a lot of my students is, and myself, is that it's so easy with the kind of plethora of tools that we have at our disposal to, just completely get lost in the sauce and just not write anything at all, instead of, taking time to just tweak parameters on one synth, or, scrolling through, 10,000 kicks to find the perfect one or whatever. Generally speaking, I found those to be the main hurdles of actually getting stuff done. So being able to sort of work quickly and, try to avoid the many pitfalls of, getting lost and sidetracked and starting to mix too early or arrange too early or spend way too much time finding the perfect sample. All that stuff is, I found to be sort of detrimental to my workflow. And I found that working quickly and with as many kind of roadblocks taken out of the way as possible is, my key to finishing tracks. And that's sort of the workflow I tried to impart to my students as well.
Yeah. It's like, what are some specific things you do consistently to make sure you actually finish a track and do it well?
Sure. Well, big thing is I've noticed that a lot of people disregard the session view in Ableton entirely. They don't use it at all. They don't know how to use it or why, which I totally get because it's something unique to Ableton. No other DAW really has it. So if you're coming from, Logic or, Reason or even Fruity Loops or something like that, it's just completely alien to them.
Yep.
But I find that it's extremely useful as a place to start drafting out your ideas before necessarily committing to an arrangement. I find that a very common pitfall is that people start arranging way too early. They have, 1, 4, or 8 bar loop, and they expect that to sort of sustain the full length of a 3.5 minute song. And it pretty much never can do that. There's some ideas that are so good that they can sustain that amount of time. But for most instrumental music, it's unlikely. So what I found is starting in the session view first, the workflow that I put most of my students through and myself through is starting in the session view and creating 4 different drum clips first, all at different energy levels. So a drum clip for your intro, a drum clip for your verse or build-up section, a drum clip for your chorus, and a drum clip for your outro or breakdown. And by the way, this is a technique that I've learned from Matt Donner at Pyramind. He's an incredible teacher. He's the guy who sort of pioneered this sort of workflow, and I've taken a lot from him. So shout out Matt Donner.
Yeah.
But basically the workflow is this, one thing that makes music engaging, especially over a longer track length, is the change in energy level over time. The energy level doesn't change, well, we have ourselves an ambient piece, which, isn't necessarily the greatest if you want to, engage your audience and have the music be at the forefront of their attention at all times. So it's really the change in energy that makes music dynamic and interesting for me. And having the 4 different drum clips at the very beginning, first off, allows you to escape the 8 bar loop hellhole that many people find themselves in. And then also have these changes in energy built in so that these 4 different drum clips can serve as jumping off points for different sections of our song. So once you've written the clips, you can, say, write an accompanying chord progression for your intro drum clip, a different one for your B section, let's say, And then after you've done that across, I don't know, let's say drums, bass, chords, and melody, then once you have all those parts working in the session view, you can actually go ahead and just record yourself triggering the different scenes in the session view and sort of lay out a preliminary arrangement in the arrangement view. So I like to put off the arrangement process for as long as possible because I really want to make sure that I've thrown up everything creatively against the wall and just sort of see what sticks. And the arrangement process is really just a matter of organizing those ideas and sort of whittling it down to the cream of the crop there. So
yeah. No, that's a solid workflow, man.
Yeah.
I learned a very similar process when I went to Dubspot. Did you ever hear that school in New York City? Rest in peace, Dubspot, back in the day.
Yeah, I heard they folded.
Oh, dude, but anyway, I went there and they had the exact, like literally day one. It was, all right, here's session view. This is going to confuse the hell out of you. And we're going to dive into this first because of A, B, C, and D. And that's basically what you just spelled out was, let's create ideas. Let's do a brain dump of clips in session view on different tracks and start to organize them in scenes and then get those little idea boosters and just copy and paste them over or play them out into arrangement view. And I'm a drummer, so starting off with drum clips is like my bread and butter. So I'm happy to hear you say that. Unless you're making like spa music, where it's just like one Omnisphere patch for like 7 hours. Next episode is with Bobby Alcinsky, and he was in episode number 32. There's a DistroKid, which is what I personally use for my own music in my band. There's a lot of options. CD Baby.
That's my favorite too. Yeah, DistroKid.
Yeah. So from your perspective, you've done a lot of reviews on all these different distributors. Is there one that you would consider better for a specific type of artist, and why?
I haven't done in-depth personal experiences with all of them, I must admit. I know about them, and I know about all of the intricacies of most of them, and I've played with them, and I've tried most of them, but I can't say I know them in depth. That being said, I know them enough to understand what's going on and what the differences are. And really, when it comes down to it, it's a matter of not only money, but it's how much you're going to get at the end, how long it's going to take you to get it. Okay. There are some, and I don't want to name names because I don't want to get in trouble, but there's some distributors that are, they're publishing agreements. You get caught in a publishing agreement without quite understanding that. And the next thing you know, you can't get out of it for a year. And so you have to be careful about things like that. There are other ones that are fairly transparent, and DistroKid, that seems to be the easiest and somewhat the cheapest. It's a great deal. SoundCloud, one of the things I mentioned in this presentation was I think every musician should have a SoundCloud account. And the reason why is SoundCloud is the best place for having a kind of a playground. Put your stuff up and get some feedback. And if it doesn't work, it's really easy to take it down.
Yeah.
You can't do that on Spotify or Apple Music or something. It'll take a couple of weeks to take it down. And, you've kind of defeated the purpose of the whole thing.
So when you mean testing a song, are you thinking of feedback from like the comments of a song that's uploaded to SoundCloud? Or do you mean like maybe how many streams you get within a short period of time because it's starting to take off and it just seems like a better hit?
Well, I think it's more the comments that you would get. If it's doing what you're expecting it to, and you might throw an email or a message out, a post to social post to your followers and say, take a listen to this, see what you think, and is it going in the right direction? That in some way that kind of violates the way an artist works because you should be working from your heart.
Yeah, right.
But there's a certain amount of group testing that we do. And, and if you're not sure either way, why not get some feedback? Because sometimes that's the case too, especially if you're doing your own stuff. You might say, well, I'm just not sure. Does it need a bridge or does it not? Or, is this beat working? Or, there's so many different things that you might as well get some feedback.
Right.
And SoundCloud's a wonderful place for that because you can get the feedback. And like I say, you can take something down, put something new up in a flash.
Yeah, that's true. And I know that if you pay one of their premium plans, which I do as an artist, you can actually replace the file. There's been times where maybe I made a different change to the same track and I just re-uploaded it and I didn't lose my stats or comments or anything.
This is all brought about by the fact that everything in the music business once upon a time was kind of, the goal was to get 1 million. You hit 1 million and you were doing pretty good. You got a gold record or platinum record actually, and you're making some money. So everything was kind of built around 1 million. And when you think about it, 1 million is a lot. But in the digital age, it's not. That's the big thing. People have to get their arms around this, that in fact 1 million isn't what it used to be when we're talking about something online. So it's a sense of scale here. The scale is blown up somewhat. A minor hit is around 50 million these days, a minor hit. When you hit 1 million, you'll get some traction. You'll get some people that will kind of raise their eyebrow on it. But, 50 million, that's when everybody wants a piece of you. When we get to 100 million, then we're talking 100 million plus, in the hundreds of millions, I should say. That's a hit. That's a real hit these days. And you're making some money. At that point, you can, even fractions of a cent, you can make some money. A worldwide global hit is now 1 billion.
That's a lot of streams. Because there's, myself included, there's so many artists and people that listen to this podcast who don't really understand the legal side or the payment side of how that actually works in the digital age that we're in. And you had some great things to share. Let's kind of talk a little bit about that. Just, I think it's good for people to stay educated, whether they have 50 million streams or whether they have, just 10 or 20 streams. Like, why is it the way it is in the digital world with releasing your music online, and who's getting paid and what does that look like?
Yeah, well, it's funny because all over the world, this question keeps on coming up. Yeah. I just read something this morning in England where there was a new organization that was getting together to find out where all the money was going, all the streaming money was going. So, I mean, this is something that black box money, I think you've heard about black box money, which is money that's collected, but they don't know where to send it. So there's royalties being collected, and they're sitting in they call it a black box, but what it is sitting in escrow someplace or in a bank account. And this is for every Spotify. It's for every streaming service,
Pandora, all those places.
Yeah, all those. And the problem, usually the biggest problem is metadata, and this is something that artists really can't get their arms around either. You have to pay attention to that because that's how you get paid. And if you slip up on that in any way, there may be royalties that are owed to you that you won't be able to get. And the new Music Modernization Act is actually trying to fix that.
Yep, I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
That just passed. They're trying to fix it. That being said, what will happen is there's going to be like a limitation of 2 or 3 years. So if you don't claim that money in that particular time, you're done. You can't go back and get it.
Yeah. Next up is episode number 33 with Craig Anderton.
A lot of people just don't understand is that today's DAW sitting in that computer is equivalent to like a $1 million studio a couple of years ago, I mean, all those instruments, all those synchronization options and busing and routing and preamps and the backline and the compressors, and you've got all these signal processors you need to learn and virtual instruments and all that. It's an awful lot. I say to people, it's very much as if you walked into a record plant in 1969 and the engineer said, hey, I've got great news and I've got bad news. The great news, I'm only charging you $2 an hour to use the studio. The bad news is no one's going to be here. Here are the keys. Good luck. People would be totally lost, and they're lost a lot with DAWs. So just as a guitarist has to practice scales, you need to practice your DAW. I spend one of the really fortunate aspects of my gig is that I do a tip every Friday for PreSonus, for the PreSonus blog about using Studio One. And I also do a monthly column for Sound on Sound about Cakewalk. So I'm essentially getting paid to learn the programs, which is a really good deal. So I'll go deep into rabbit holes But the other thing is that when I go deep into those rabbit holes, I'm always recording because you never know when inspiration is going to strike. And there have been so many times that I've been like working on the DAW and being like totally, totally left brain and trying to learn something new. And I'm playing guitar or keyboards or coming up with a synth patch and Massive or, whatever.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, it's like, wow, I like that. And instantly I'm in my right brain and I'm gone. It's like I can finish the article later.
Yeah.
So you need to be sensitive to those moments. I mean, that's another thing. So many times when people get into a creative block, what can I do? Just do anything. Just sit down and play. You can't go wrong by playing. Something will happen. It might be good, might be bad, might be indifferent. I'm not one of those people who writes 50 songs and 2 of them are good and I work on those. Pretty much everything I start, I actually finish and turn into a song because I'm not being conscious about it. I'm not trying to write a song. It comes to me and I just go with it.
Yeah, I find when I have more of a playful mentality where I'm not trying to write a hit, my best work comes out. Where it's really just almost playing for the sake of the love of it and having fun rather than trying to force it.
I really think that we're entering a golden age of like personal music. Because if you think about it for a second, music we've only been capable of freeze drying music and reconstituting it later for like 130 years or so. Before recording, all music was transitory. It was ephemeral. If you missed Beethoven's third, you missed Beethoven's third. I mean, that's just the way it was. You weren't going to go online and hear it. It wasn't going to be leaked with an MP3. It existed for that moment.
It's a novelty, really.
Music has always been a personal thing. I mean, people play instruments because they like to play instruments. Before TVs became so popular, every home, well, not every home, but most homes had a piano. People played guitars. School taught you how to do things. And it only became warped into this concept of being a business in the 60s and actually less in the 60s, but in the 70s and 80s, it really became like, oh, this is a way to make money. This is a gig, and the emphasis got off the fact that it's a voyage of personal discovery. It's a creative thing, And so like, I see the old guard basically, looking at people with Ableton Live and on a laptop in their bedrooms, and they sort of go, "Oh, look at the kids pushing buttons with Ableton Live in a bedroom," And it's like, no, man, this is like they're discovering music. They're like really having a good time. They're becoming lifers in this,
Yeah.
And so the thing is, they'll never make any money at it. Well, they won't make any money if they like fishing or bowling or going to the movies or anything else,
True.
And I'll tell you, the process of making music for me, every time I do a song, it's like a Rorschach, I see myself coming back at me. I learn so much about myself, and I have such an interesting time doing it that even if someone came to me and said, no one else will ever hear your music ever again, I would still keep doing it just the same. That to me, it's a personal thing. Yeah. And I'm glad to see it's getting back to that. And I'm thrilled that somebody can go on YouTube and get 100 subscribers. I mean, that's great. I don't look down at that at all.
Mm-hmm. Next episode was with my friends from the duo Animal Prints, and we had a recap convo about our experiences at the DIY Musicians Conference in Austin back in 2019. So this is episode number 34. Let's go back and forth and talk about the different workshops. They had all these sessions and these industry leaders in the music industry sharing different things from like email marketing to Pandora was there, and they're launching this new platform called AMP, which is like helping artists understand the analytics of their streaming of their music and connect with their fans on a deeper level. Let's kind of go back and forth and talk about like one workshop to another. What was one workshop that really stuck out to you and why?
One workshop that stood out to me was crowd engagement and empowering your fans. And
Jason Leckberg, direct to fan sales. Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah, I found a lot of the points that he was saying to be super insightful. As an independent musician, the biggest hurdle to supporting yourself is often how to end up monetizing your music and your business. And so he manages several different bands. The largest of them being, I think, Steel Panther, which the gist of what he was saying was that as a musician, you have to participate in all these different platforms, your Instagram, your Twitter, Facebook, etc. But really, you own your own website and your email subscriber list. And it would be silly of you not to really fully take advantage of that and leverage that. And he was talking about the average revenue that an artist receives from 10,000 streams, across all these different platforms. And it's basically like $35. I think it comes out to something around that. I think.
Yeah. He was talking about like what every fan is worth. You can make $29 so much easier by selling t-shirts and tickets to local shows and CDs and your merch. You can get to $29 like 5 times faster than you can trying to get 10,000 streams. It was like $29 equals 9,667 streams on average on Spotify. Yeah, it's wild.
That's a disheartening number.
Very, yeah, a little piece of everybody died inside when they like heard that.
Yeah, he's like, oh, you want 1 million streams? Well, you could just sell t-shirts to 100 people and it'll be money, basically.
Exactly.
And so he really focused on how to get your merch game up. And he talked about using Shopify plugins on your website. He was also talking about a business that was actually based in Austin. I hope that I get this right. I think you pay a monthly subscription rate to some of these services. Amplifier and Inked was another one. And like
Print on demand.
Yeah.
And basically they're all print on demand services. So if as somebody orders one piece of merch, let's say an extra small women's t-shirt, there's a service that will print that one for you instead of you having to tote around, God forbid, like the box of t-shirts that is just never organized as hard as you try.
Exactly. Merchandising is a huge profit margin if you do it right. There's the Creative Juice podcast. One of the speakers there, Circa from Entrepreneur, he talks a ton about merchandise in like a 5-episode series. And I saw so many people there at the conference, the DIY conference, talking about merchandising. And as an artist, you can make a lot of money doing that if you do it right. Yeah.
Some bands is how they make most of their money on a tour, especially if you're like the opening act and you're maybe not getting the cut of the door. But that's how you can make money is merch. And actually, as a side note, our friend used to work for Tyler, the Creator, and she was staying at festivals and stuff. He has his own fashion line.
But he probably started his fashion line because that was how he was making money.
He makes most of his income, which is contributes more to this profit for sure. So
yeah, totally.
And he's actually created like a store experience for users and for his fans, and so to the point where people will wait in line before a merch booth opens if they know that he will be selling things there because they're so excited about the different options that they'll have and like the special items they'll have access to. And that was something that Jason kind of touched on as well, was like really he emphasized something that Steel Panthers did, which is putting out a monthly design for t-shirts or mugs, etc. Just giving people opportunities to support you financially. And then again, he was saying that they use those services to do print on demand so that they don't have to run, like send out huge numbers of things to printers and end up with a box of like a pallet of mugs in somebody's garage, He also talked about the use of fan clubs, empowering people to support you through fan clubs. And so I don't know, did they charge to be a member of the fan club? Was there a fee for somebody to join the fan club?
Yeah, I think the way he had it set up, it was like for $5 a month, you get exclusive access to like videos and like live chats and unreleased songs and stuff like that. Doing the kind of what he talked about through Patreon, it only takes 8% of like a subscription transaction. I know Shopify is kind of expensive and other membership websites can be kind of expensive starting out. And that's why I chose Patreon. And then like giving discounts on merchandise that we sell through that Bandcamp. And then also like doing a mixtape every month. And especially as a producer, like this is the Ableton podcast. So I'm assuming most listeners here, have access to like a home studio where they can keep making music, you should be able to crank out a lot of content as far as just even doing remixes or just creating little mixes of other songs, giving that away to your fans. And one thing that Jason was talking about in this workshop is like continuing to pump out content. But yeah, like a fan club of some sort, a monthly subscription is a good way to continue to have that revenue to be able to justify the time you invest into your fans. And he was talking about the super fan thing too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. And he mentioned that, like he broke out like 10 different core supporters, and he showed how much those people had contributed to some of these bands over the years. And like the number was kind of staggering, and
right.
Like people that would buy every single month, if they had a new shirt out, they would buy those things. And he was like, like we've given people so many opportunities to support us that like the people that really want to be there, they can be, and like if you have something like a fan club, etc., like we've created opportunities for them to get closer, or like for them to meet the members of the band, like a meet and greet like with people after or before a show, advanced ticket purchases, like front of the line kind of thing, like first availability things. And he was like, ultimately like this has really helped generate a lot of like revenue and support their music. And so it's kind of a missed opportunity if you don't think about the ways that you can do that and like empower people that want to help you financially. So
right.
that was interesting.
And last but not least is episode number 35 with Bink Beats. We recorded this shortly after he did a big presentation and a performance at Ableton's Loop conference in LA a couple years ago. So yeah, it was a great episode talking about his live setup, and hope you enjoy. You definitely have your own sound, and a lot of it probably does have to do with the organic use of all different kinds of instruments and all that soundscaping that you're doing in Ableton Live. But yeah, your workflow is always really interesting. You don't see a lot of other artists creating all the sounds from the ground up. There's a lot of backing tracks involved, very high production, but you bring it all together really well. It's really unique.
Yeah, I've been working for years actually on this to perfect it and to shape the sound even better and better, And I mean, I get why people work with backing tracks, because it's safe. It saves a lot of hassle. And I mean, you saw my setup at Loop, right? So it's a lot of instruments, and every time if I do like a flight show, a lot of stuff needs to be arranged. I need to bring a lot of cases with instruments. It's quite a production, But I think it's worth it, So and it makes me stand out in that way, because most people don't even want to start doing that stuff.
Yeah, for real.
So yeah. Well, especially funny, look at Loop, I was actually only with my sound guy. We were just with the two of us. So I mean, when I started out, I had a crew of like 6 people, because it was just so much stuff. Like I could never think of everything. Yeah. But because over the years, the live setup, everything became more of a routine, and I got more comfortable with it and more. It got more easy. So in the end, we're just like touring sometimes now with just 2 persons.
Yeah.
So yeah, I never thought that would be possible, but yeah.
So what are some other challenges that you've faced performing live? I mean, outside of just being able to have all the actual tools on stage to perform with.
I've encountered a lot. Because, when I started making the movies, like the Beats Unraveled series, I was just doing one song at a time. I knew how to do this in Ableton, But then to do like an hour-long concert, to program that into one file of Ableton, because it's just one file. This was quite a job, So it took me quite some time to figure out how to do this. At first, I had like a system with like over 300 tracks next to each other, which was really not efficient, and also CPU-wise, it was not really doing it. So I had to find new ways of how to make it more compact and how to make it more efficient. Yeah, I learned a lot doing this, and also when I started out, I started really with the concept of doing everything live. So my setup was quite big, but it was even bigger back then, because I had like 3 kick drums as well, for instance. because I having different kick sounds for different songs. And one of the things I noticed was, because I was also playing smaller stages, mostly subs are underneath the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have like 3 kick drums and one of them was like a gran casa, like a big drum, like it starts to resonate with the sub speakers. So
Yeah.
like getting good kick sound was quite a hassle.
Yeah.
Especially to do festivals, like it was hardly possible. So this is one of the things I sort of, when I started improving the live set, skipped, and I went a little bit to, so I have like one kick trigger now for this, because wherever I go, I need to have the right sounds, and I don't want to mess with like subs underneath the stage. And you're making a show as well, right? So it should sound good as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's enough still that that you can see that I loop, but I started out really with the concept of doing everything live, like all the sounds, but then slowly you have to sort of give in to, it's a balance between making a really tight show or, or sticking to the concept. So
right.
Yeah, these are all things like you learn from playing live, and you cannot learn otherwise, right? Another thing is the plugin I was using, I built it like partly myself, but also with some help of other people. It was working till a certain extent. It was working well, but then for the 30p, when I was adding songs actually to the live set was becoming bigger. I started to get certain issues where sometimes a loop would be 1 bar longer than I intended to be. So something was delaying in the plugin. So in the end, like before we released the plugin, actually, I had got help from one of the programmers from Ableton to help me out with how the patch was set up, and he rewrote some stuff within the patch, so it was actually much more efficient and much more tight.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all things like you come across, but like you said, like there's nobody out there doing this. So yeah, you walk into a lot of trouble when you try doing this. So
yeah, there's a lot of variables.
Well.
I mean, for sure. The music should be fun at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine that like mic feedback was probably an issue at some point, at some time, because you're using a lot of microphones.
That was never really the issue. It was funny because, I mean, it can be an issue if I play really small halls. Like I had some stages where like the stage was small, but also the speakers were turned a little bit inwards. And like the floor and the ceiling were concrete. Okay, that's like that's a recipe for disaster, right?
Right.
Depending on the hall, mostly it goes quite well because I don't play with monitors. I have in-ear monitors, so on stage there's not so much sound coming back from the PA, and the microphones I close mic a lot of things. So yeah, there are a couple of DPAs also. But it's working pretty well, actually.
Cool.
Yeah, so feedback is not that much of a problem. I thought it would be more of a problem. I must say that also I programmed everything in Ableton, so all the microphones are off, basically, and they only go on when they need to go on.
Nice.
And this saves also a lot of hassle, so it's not so much stacking up of sound, especially when you're using a lot of effects. So stuff only goes on when it needs to be on, and that saves also a lot of trouble. Yeah, and EQing every mic, take out what's really not necessary for the signal that you're using, right? Yeah. Especially low ends, because all the percussion mics, you can cut the low ends, because if every loop you make has a little bit of the low end, like takes a little bit of low end from what's in the hall, things start to rumble and start to sound unclear.
Muddy.
So right. So it's a lot of EQing as well, and just a lot of things to consider and to think about. Yeah.
Once again, big thanks everybody for listening to the podcast. Make sure that you leave a review, subscribe, hit that follow button. I would appreciate it. Also, if you want to save some money on the latest version of Ableton Live, maybe you haven't upgraded, maybe you're still stuck on version 1, Live 11 is pretty cool. And I'd be happy to hook you up with a massive discount. So go to liveproducersonline.com/buyableton for more details. If you want to join the newsletter and be the first to know when new episodes come out, go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter. you want to hang out in Discord, ask questions, share articles, get updates on things with Ableton Live, get packs, whatever, go to my Discord channel and join, hang out with me and others, and you can do that at liveproducersonline.com/Discord. Much love, everybody. Have a wonderful week/weekend, and I will see you soon.